Hey, it's Andrew here, and welcome to the E-commerce Fuel Podcast, the show dedicated to helping 7- and 8-figure brand owners build incredible businesses and amazing lives. And man, I think so many of us are working towards building businesses that can grow and scale. And if you want to have an amazing business and an incredible life, like the one thing that you have to really get obsessive about at some point, you can get by for a while without doing this, and just like you could drive a car with loose lug nuts for a while, which, speaking of last year, I actually had that happen. Took the car to the mechanic and drove for about 3 miles and realized the lug nuts were barely on. Slightly terrifying. You can do that for a while until the wheels literally come off the vehicle and you just crash into a burning fire without really great processes or some kind of foundation for your systems in your business. And I've always been interested in that and was researching more deeply on that front and came across this company called Process Driven, which was really interesting because they geeked out on processes in a way that I had seen few people do. People talk about a lot about like, oh, hey, you have to have processes in your business, like the whole intro I just did, but they really tell you how to do it, specifically how to get into the weeds and structure them well. And over at Process Driven, it seemed like that was what they specialized in. So I dug a little bit deeper and found out it was owned by a woman called Layla Pomper. She's the CEO and owner, and was able to get her on the show today to talk about all of these things. So Layla, I'm excited to be super geeks here about processes with someone who loves them more than I do. Good to have you on.
Thanks so much for having me. And yes, geeking out is on the menu.
But before we get into all things process, I have to ask, you are a huge camping fan. So, kind of put everything onto a motorcycle, go up into the woods, camp for a while. How long have you been doing this? Like, is this something new? Give me a little detail on this, because I love also getting outside and exploring.
Andrew, this is my new obsession. I moved out here to Utah not too long ago because my husband is obsessed with dirt biking, and I was fine riding passenger. And then about a year and a half ago, I made the mistake of riding for myself, and I just got hooked. A month later, I was licensed. Not long after that, we started planning our first multi-day moto camp adventure. And I don't know, I just love it. Something about the risk and the being off the grid of going up into the mountains, especially around here in Utah, and just getting lost with just your bike, your maintenance kit, and some camping equipment. It's been amazing. It's my new obsession.
Where in Utah are you based out of?
Salt Lake City. So yeah, we moved here from Pennsylvania back during the COVID period. And now it's like, now that I'm here, I have to get outside more. So this is my excuse.
Are you usually heading up and like to the Wasatch or the Uintas, or kind of across over to the west? Where's some of your favorite trails?
You know the geography out here, man. You're good. Yeah, we've pretty much had every direction now except northwest, and we're just planning different, multi-week trips as we can fit them into the schedule. But our most recent one was in southern Utah in the Moab region, which was really, really cool. So a lot of iconic landscape out here, and we're trying to hit each biome if we can.
Very cool. We did a trip kind of up through Page, Arizona, up through kind of Grand Staircase and Capitol Reef and that whole area. And it's just Southern Utah is spectacular. I thought I knew Southern Utah because I had driven through it a million times, but just the density of cool places down there I would put it up against almost anywhere in the country in terms of just amazing landscapes and just the number of them.
Yeah. One of the reasons we moved here is we went on a few cross-country road trips, and Utah was just always the prettiest state we drove through. That was what narrowed it down for us. It's just a gorgeous place to be. So great that you were able to do a road trip through that region. Is awesome.
The Trans-American Trail on your list by chance? So this is a trail for people who aren't geeky like we are. Goes all the way from the East Coast to the West Coast on dirt roads. And it's a pretty big popular trail, I think, with bikers.
That is the goal. Right now we're on 250cc, like more so souped up dirt bikes. So we're focusing on shorter things like backcountry discovery routes that go over an entire state at a time. But man, that would be the goal. That's the dream as we can plan it out in the future.
Okay, processes before we lose everyone apart from the 10 people who are super interested in moto camping. When I landed on your website, I knew that like it's pretty apparent to me that you were very invested in processes and knew your stuff. But I think I was really sold and like, okay, I have the right woman here. When I went through to book you, try to contact you to book you for the website, and sometimes, a lot of times you go to contact forms, right? And they just have one, and same thing on our website. You have one contact form, and people will reach out to us for a lot of things. Maybe they want to try to sponsor an event. Maybe they are interested in the community. Maybe they want free consulting, whatever it is, tons of different reasons. And then oftentimes either every company, yours, mine included, it has like the situations where this is a great fit, might be a fit, terrible fit, not going to happen ever. But often to get there, you've got to go through a series of emails. And if you're on it, maybe you've got some saved templates and you or a team member responds to it, but there's a lot of friction there. And I went through this one, and I think you're using a tool called landbot.site, which I'm totally going to steal because it's brilliant. And I asked, so you asked me, I was like, hey, what are you here for? And so I hit the podcast speaking request, and it's like, okay, who are you? What's your website? In a very tactful way, you were like, hey, like, why is this worth our time? Like, is this your first episode ever? Kind of thing. And then, so you asked me all this qualifying information in a logical based flow. It was like a type form style thing, but way more interactive. It was like if Typeform and ChatGPT had a baby, this would be the tool that was used. Anyway, talk a little bit about even just that and how much that has saved, because I imagine that saved a ton of time for you on the inbound.
Oh yeah. So back in the day, I used to spend most of my life in email. I mean, how many creators and e-commerce owners and leaders amongst us can relate to that? And email was one of the first areas where I started kind of applying the process work into our own business, because I think when it comes to process, we think of it as, tightening the lug nuts on the bike, right? You think that's something that's useful to do. Yeah, I should do it, but it doesn't feel good to fix it. So I think to solve the motivation gap with process, I always like to start on the thing that feels really good. Like, man, it hurts to spend 20 hours a week on email. That might be an area where process would be worth implementing. So one of the things we did was, yes, that Landbot flow. And Landbot is a software. It's kind of like it's not an AI-based software, but it allows you to make logical flows in a chatbot environment. And essentially all you do is feed in your process of a conversation and try to front load that information as much as possible, which I think is a good lesson for process in general. If we can just get the information at the beginning, then we can move forward versus spending so much time, as you said, going back and forth trying to get information, especially with things like podcasts, where the creator yourself, like, you're so busy. We don't want to take any more of your time going back and forth playing ping pong on what the call to action should be. And so we created that forum with the hope of getting everything front loaded, so that way it's way easier for both parties to get what they need and make it clear whether or not it's the right fit.
Do email is a big pain point. You use the contact form. Do you have a personal assistant that helps with email? And I'm asking this because myself, I know some other people in our community right now are kind of thinking through like, hey, should I hire an EA? This is a pain point. Or do you think through like, hey, really, you don't need a personal assistant if you can systematize this in a great way. So thoughts on that?
I'm so glad you asked. I think I've always felt like I was a little crazy, because I know EA is usually the first role people suggest hiring for. But I found the latter situation to be more the truth. When you hire your team members to do certain functions of the business, adding the email related to that function has been the way that we've systemized it. We've either eliminated the email by making it self-service, and when email needed to consistently happen, I just cut myself out of it entirely, where it doesn't even hit me. It goes directly to the relevant persons who have responsibility over that area. And so as it stands, and I think this boggles the mind, but right now I've gone from 20 hours of email a week back 2 years ago, probably when I first started creating content, to maybe an hour and a half of just all emails, internal, external, and everything else just I never even see unless I need to. So I think often the EA approach is a Band-Aid, and it can work really well in certain situations when you're in the early stages of growth. But beyond that, when you have other people, there's no reason to have an assistant for you if it can just go to another person who's able to fully resolve it versus just handle the low-hanging fruit.
So instead of having an EA become your router, figure out how to route things more efficiently from the source when they're inbound.
Exactly. Rather than using the human as the duct tape between the broken process.
How do you, what about internal team communications? We're getting a little off of like, very strict systems here, but it's my podcast, so I can go do this, which is fun. So how do you do, like, when you think about, how big is your team?
Right now we have about 10 in-house and then contractors. So about 15 probably.
Yeah, that's a meaningful team. And so an hour and a half of email per week, I would say I probably spend more than an hour and a half per week emailing just my team alone. So how do you really streamline? What are your rules for minimizing email clutter and maximizing effectiveness?
Well, I think some teams will drop their jaws at this, but we don't email. Like we don't do it. We never email internally at all. So the only time we would have an email is if there's like a promotion or an HR kind of thing. And that's the only time we'd have an email record for the time stamping. But as a team, we communicate where work happens, which I know we kind of alluded to before we started recording here, is ClickUp for us. So we have an area where all of our tasks are 90+% of the time. When we're talking, it's about a thing. So we go to that thing and we just communicate there. But we have an email-free culture. And if there's a general topic that we want to discuss, we even have a task called, learn about our marketplace. And we just have that for everybody. So if we find an interesting thing about, Andrew's got this new podcast episode, you should all listen to it. We post it there. But once again, spares the email thread and keeps everything happening in real time through, in this case, our work management software.
That's super cool. Do you have for ClickUp, and I'm going to be interjecting some questions from Patrick. Patrick is our community manager. He does a lot of our systems and processes, phenomenal team member. And so he had a couple of questions he wanted me to slide in here, which I'm going to do. How important is it if you're building a systems process from scratch to have all of your team members bought on board? Because sometimes you get people that, and I say this as someone who is, has probably been guilty in the past often of not logging into our SOP, like in Asana, where we've traditionally used moving to ClickUp. But I've been very guilty of this. How important is it for things to work well to have 100% of people really bought into this and versus, because sometimes you have great team members and that's just not how they think. If that's the case, do you just kind of force them to do it that way? Is it that crucial for the workflow of the business and streamlining things?
I don't think there's a right answer here. I think for some businesses, yes, it is so important that it's worth that persuasion. But I would say in general, you want to have everyone with the power of persuasion in the company to believe. Doesn't mean they have to practice it every day, but they need to believe in it. So we have a lot of folks who come to us and they're like, hey, help us systemize our business. But my CEO isn't quite convinced. He wants to make sure he just does everything in his Outlook. And no amount of ClickUp setup or Smart Suite setup is going to fix that because you've got lack of buy-in and belief from the top. But when it comes to the overall team, I think there are rituals that need to be held in common. And there's going to be different lines for different people of what's sacred and what's negotiable. For us, sacred is if you have a task, it goes in ClickUp. That's sacred because it's so important. But what's not so sacred is, do you take notes in meetings? We don't care. But if you do, it'd be nice if you shared them. I think that line is going to be different, but the belief is, yes, required by everybody. But it's so easily generated, especially for idea people, that I think it's a pretty low bar to have.
Yeah, I love that idea of sacred versus not. What are some of the other processes in your business that you're most proud of? I think everyone thinks, and again, not excluding myself here, there are these things in the business that only I can do, and that may be true in a few instances, but I think by and large, most of those are probably, we go through the same process doing them probably 80, 90, 100% of the time. So what are some of the other processes in your business that you're most proud of, especially if they're ones that got you out of something that you didn't think you could get off your plate?
Oh my gosh. I think the last 18 months, the biggest lesson is just realizing that there's nothing only I can do, that I'm not special. That's the great humbling journey of business ownership that we can all probably relate to. So if I had to pick a specific example, I think I would go with the one that most greatly impacts my day-to-day besides email. I would say email is number one, but number two, because we already talked about email, is probably marketing production work. This is a strange area of my business because probably like many of you here, beyond just doing what our core work is, we market it. And I am still doubling as the face of the brand. So I do a lot of that marketing content creation. And a beautiful place that we've been able to get to is kind of what you hear people talk about. If you just sit down, you record the video, you do the creative component, you send the file, and you never hear from it again. That is something I'm very proud of, because I started my YouTube journey, recording client questions after being on, long consulting calls all day. And I would stay up a little bit later to film these videos. I would do the whole process myself, get it uploaded on YouTube, usually with mistakes. And that was a huge lift. And now it's more of the upload and watch how the analytics come in a few months when it actually hits the channel. That to me has been
well,
huge.
I imagine too, as someone who's in a similar, creating most of the content, the public facing content for the brand, man, the higher the degree of friction that you have when it's not a linear relationship. If there's a little more friction, you're like exponentially less likely to do something. So I imagine I'd be shocked if your content output didn't also increase exponentially as that happened. I would love to dive into that a little bit with you. So you sit down, you're recording a YouTube video. You sit down, you press record. When you hit stop, what happens? What do you do?
So right now, when I hit stop, the process is that I take the raw file and I put them into a folder template that we always have. So the same folders, same names, and I name the folder the episode number, and I name the raw file the episode number just in case. Then I upload it to a shared drive. And that's it. Done. That's all I do. As part of my filming, I do usually write a bullet point script, but it's not, word for word. It's just, here's the major talking points that I don't want to mess up. And that's about all my involvement. But the beauty of it is I'm involved fully with no handoffs for the creative component. So I don't have to go back and forth with drafting and this and that and the other. But when it comes to the actual post-production work, I'm not involved except for maybe a final check if I want to look over to make sure it, matches the content, or seeing how the video performs.
So what happens? You upload it and it's in that folder. What happens? Take us into your team, the machine that you've built here alongside your team. What happens once you leave it there in that folder?
Yeah. So the process comes to life. It all lives in ClickUp. Let's start with that frame. It starts as a task in ClickUp with a bunch of subtasks. And guys, if you don't use ClickUp, just insert whatever software or piece of paper you use here. Has this outline with all of the different steps. My steps are step 1 and 2 of scripting and recording. Check, check. After that, what happens is the video is inside Drive. Our video editor knows to look for it there on a set day of the week, every week. They start working. They produce a draft. When they submit that draft, it gets back for someone for initial review. Another task, do the initial review for common errors. They do a revision, comes back, do a second check to make sure it's accurate. So these are each little steps that are assigned on the same day of the week, every week, to the same people every time. After that happens, the video is considered produced, and we move on to the other areas of creative. So thumbnail, title, blog posts, these are all just steps that are all templated out. And we've got this process down that it's about one template that takes 2 weeks to go through the whole journey, but we usually end up doing it about 2 to 3 months in advance for our channel. And that's kind of the machine that just keeps humming, and each person owns their step on every video that goes through.
Your team, the hardest part I've found with some of this stuff, finding great video editors that can kind of intersperse things in, finding people that can write great titles. Writing titles is hard. They're so important, but it's difficult. How do you, I'd love to hear if do you have frameworks in there? Like, do you just hire really great people? I'd love to hear, what are your rules for those things? And then also, is your team, are they the Western based team? Are they in the States? Are they great overseas contractors? And anything you'd be willing to share, I'd be super curious to hear.
I think if I had raised outside funding, my answer would be entirely different. So I'll give that caveat. This is my experience being self-funded and, funding all the production in-house. So the way that I approached it is viewing delegation as levels of, do the thing I tell you to, do the thing that you think you should do, tell me what we should do, and do it. Those are the levels of delegation, give or take. When I started this delegation journey, it was very much, I had an SOP, a standard operating procedure that said, here is what it means to have a great title. It would be, comprised of YouTube videos I watched to learn about it for myself. Best practices, here's where to learn more. And it would kind of outline the steps and guidelines of what, in this case, a great title would be. And then I just hired somebody who could do it. In the early days, particularly, that would require reviews of, this didn't quite satisfy step 2. My process wasn't clear enough. Let me fix that. But as the SOP got clearer, it's harder to not get the desired result that the SOP guides you to. It's kind of like baking a cake. If the recipe is very clear, it's going to be a cake. It's not going to be a tart. And that's where that's at. Our team is currently distributed, asynchronous, and hybrid. Decentralized, excuse me. So asynchronous, decentralized, remote teams. So we're not working at the same time. We're not working in the same time zone. We've got people in France, in Florida, in Utah. And what that means is we have a lot of this stuff written down, and why that communication via ClickUp is so important. I will say this is changing as the business grows, because now we're looking to get more specialists. And had I had funding from the beginning, I would have jumped right to that, because you can forego really strong SOPs if you pay for higher talent, or, expertise and so on, because they just bring that. Tell them the result, they'll get you there. But I think for many of us who are bridging that messy middle of business ownership, the SOPs are invaluable to have as a guide rail.
How do you think about creating great SOPs? I mean, there's another one from Patrick that I also echo, is not everyone works well with to-dos, to-do lists, or checklists. So how do you encourage people who don't usually work that way to work that way? And along that same line, like, I think about some of our SOPs, some of them are great. And some of them are like 8 pages long. And sometimes when I'm covering for team members, I'll get it there. It's our SOP. If anyone has the buy-in in the business, it's me. It's my business. And I'll get in there and I'll look at it and I'll just like throw up a little bit in my mouth and be like, oh my gosh, like this is like 20 minutes of rereading. And I'll kind of go through and I won't use the SOP. It's not serving its purpose. How do you blend that? Thoughts on creating SOPs that have enough detail to get what you need across, but also don't just make people just not use them because they're so complex.
Yeah. This is going to be different to every viewer, right? So what your team member is going to need and what you're going to need is going to be different. So I think when it comes to SOPs, we want to create them for the modern attention span, which is why if you Google SOP, many people here probably have, you see those long Word docs that are 12 pages of work instructions, ISO certified, this, that, and the other. That's not realistic these days, especially for our teams where we're not, cracking a whip that they must reference it at all moments. So instead, what I like to think of is keeping some rules of thumb in mind. SOPs should generally fit on 1 page, should be less than 8 steps, and should be able to be drafted in about 10 to 20 minutes. And when it comes to SOPs, they need to be something that's actually going to make work easier to do. Because if they make you fill with dread when you look at them, well, then that's not an SOP. That's just an angry person talking over your shoulder saying, do it this way.
Those are great rules. I'd love to talk about ClickUp a little bit. Like, why do you like ClickUp so much? It's been interesting. It seems like it's been around enough where people are starting to be more familiar with it. We're moving to it at our company. What is it about ClickUp that you think makes a great platform for running your business relative to the other platforms out there?
Yeah. I mean, I'll bring it back to e-commerce. In this industry, you already have so many specialty pieces of software. And as your company grows, you're going to add more specialty tools. You might add Landbot, you might add Shopify, you might add HubSpot, you might add whatever. But as you grow until you are, $100 million+ a year company, odds are there's always going to be a gap. There's going to be a need in the business, a function of the business that isn't big enough or impressive enough to warrant its own specialty tool, but it still needs to be done. A great example that usually comes up for companies around the $1 to $5 million range is HR. Like, you need to do some stuff, but does it really make sense to have an ATS yet? You're in the gray. Having a work management software like ClickUp or anything else in that arena is essentially giving you the catch-all, which you need for the small size companies. So everything from task management at the small scale, CRMs at the small scale, HR, every function of your business that does not have a specialist hired gun software there to supersize your efficiency, you need a place to put it. And that's why I think work management software makes so much sense for the budget and time constraints of lean teams.
We've been on Asana for probably, pushing the better part of a decade here. What is going to be a pleasant surprise for our team coming from Asana to ClickUp, and what is going to take some getting used to?
Dirty little secret here. I actually used to use Asana. Before ClickUp was a thing, I was using Asana, and I was so frustrated by what you had described as, everything having to be a task. So tired of having to think only in task lists, and that works for one type of brain. I think the pleasant surprise you'll find with ClickUp and the work management software arena versus the task management arena is that you're now able to think in multiple dimensions and connect things together. Rather than just thinking of what do I need to do, you can start thinking in terms of what do we do? What assets might we have? What landing pages do we have? What funnels do we have? What episodes do we have? And start tracking databases of information in addition to and alongside the tasks you have, which is where Asana, Trello, Notion, even to an extent, are still in that box.
So you've used all, at least you're obviously familiar with those, and ClickUp's been your favorite for really a holistic, having put the rest of them through their paces, one thing that can kind of be your central, everything lives here, everything goes here, everything communicates through this hub. ClickUp, in your opinion, is a great choice for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And how brutal, like with great complexity comes, lots of weeping and gnashing of teeth as you work your way up the learning curve. How steep is that learning curve for people?
The benchmark I have from working with clients one-on-one is if you've never used a work management software or a task management software ever, you've never even touched Asana, I would plan on 2 months of daily use to be a little bit teeth grindy, because your hardest battle is going to be getting used to going to a browser tab at the start of every day. Now, if you're already addicted to your email, like most professionals are, so you're already used to going to a browser tab, I would probably shorten that down to 1 month, because all you need to do is retrain your brain as to where to take your email addiction and transfer it to. For folks who already use a task management software of some kind, so they're used to communicating in there, I think the 2 to 4 week range is still about where we would be. The main pains is just changing our habits. It's not actually about the tool, which you'll pick up very quickly just by, being used to another tool like Asana. It's getting used to a different way of working that really is where you're going to see the impact of ClickUp. It's not the features as much as it's how you use them.
I know ClickUp they've rolled out like a bunch of AI features like everyone else in their dog. I say this as we're going to be rolling out an AI bot for our community soon too. How useful is it? Is it actually something that's streamlining work, that's making things more effective and productive? Or is it actually just something to like a checkbox? So, hey, we've got this as well.
I might be unpopular in my opinion. I think it's the checkbox category right now, because unlike some of the other tools out there, like Ply is one that I would actually check out that does integrate with ClickUp. There's other ChatGPT products that use contextual information, so they'll look at the information around where you click the button and do stuff based on that context. Most AI products we're seeing implemented in the software management or work management software space is a lot more simple, like a basic, here's a prompt, give me the response, which is something that most people already have in either another tab or in another tool they already use, that I wouldn't make or break any decisions based on that.
What was the Ply tool that you said? PLY, is that right?
PLY.io is an interesting, it's a category, but it's one specific tool in that category that's working in the integration and automation space with an AI SKU. And I think tools like that are where I want to see AI go when we're talking about ClickUp's AI features.
So I'm looking at the Ply website here. It says supercharge work and streamline processes by building contextual internal features into the apps you already use. That just is like someone speaking Greek to me. So what does that mean for someone who's not knee deep in processes every day?
Yeah, this I can't wait to see just being part of the tool. Ply, like if they were just acquired, that would be amazing. But essentially, it means you can add your own buttons. Think of it this way. You add your own buttons into the tools you already use that do things you want them to do. So for example, we could have a button inside our ClickUp saying send invoice. And when we click that button, ClickUp is smart enough to know we want them to send an invoice to the customer the task is about using the invoicing system that we already use. But we define that custom button based on what we want to have for our unique business, essentially merging the world of work management software and enterprise resource planning software, ERPs, bringing them together finally.
So almost like creating automations, one-click automations that use the workflow you have in ClickUp, but are smart enough to be able to infer contextual information that it needs to get done.
Essentially, you're building your own software.
Huh. All right, cool. I'm gonna have to go dive into this after we hop off here. That looks cool.
We did promise geeking out, didn't we?
I think we're delivering on this, or you are at least. So AI is kind of thumbs down and ClickUp. What are your favorite ClickUp automations or dashboards? Like if people are in there, they're in there for 2 or 3 months, like the things that if they haven't got yet, they have to go check out.
I would say automations in ClickUp as a whole feature set would be the area around the 2 to 3 month mark when you've got the basics down and people are using the tool, they know to log in, which sounds simple, but is actually one of the hardest challenges of onboarding. Automating to enforce and encourage behaviors is the strategy I see no one doing, but it's the most impactful. We have a client, Tracy, who shared in a call recently. She was like, I basically replaced the work of 2 full-time project managers with ClickUp automations that essentially just say, hey, you finished this task, but this isn't done, or you marked this complete, but there's no time tracked. Different reminders and nudges about overdues and other activities that are considered non-desirable behavior or super awesome behavior. Training the automations in ClickUp, which are very simple to use, to encourage or discourage is an incredible way to get a bunch of efficiency into your day-to-day and let your project managers actually, do the things they want to do versus just, nag people.
Have you worked, I know you have a lot of courses. We're going to talk about those in just a minute here. And you do one-on-one trainings. Sure. Have you worked with many e-commerce owners specifically?
We work with a variety of industries, and that's by design because I think the best, most innovative processes you can have are actually just stolen. So if we want to make an e-commerce company look so warm and welcoming, we'll pair them with a real estate agent and copy their follow-up method. So we serve all industries, and I'm constantly just cross-pollinating between what a contractor does versus an e-commerce Amazon reseller does, and so on.
Case in point, I'm totally stealing your workflow for our contact page on the website, 100%. What are some of the commonalities you see with e-commerce store owners specifically? So they, online presence, most of them have physical inventory, they have fulfillment, they're placing POs. What are some of the most common egregious things that you see that just make your brain hurt? Like, why have you not automated this? And once you do, it just frees up so much bandwidth. Where the biggest offenders?
I think support is probably the biggest one because e-commerce, we're talking about, generally speaking, high volume businesses where tiny inefficiencies in anything that's customer facing is so much more painful than an inefficiency in a volume play like marketing. If you're an e-commerce company, you're creating a blog post, it's one blog post. If you do it inefficiently, not a big deal. But when it comes to fulfilling the order and you're constantly forgetting to include, the thank you card, that's your special touch before you package the box, that kind of thing multiplied by 500 is a real problem. And so I think to me, the first thing I would focus on is probably where money changes hands and support, which is also a money changing hands moment, and making sure that you, the business owner, are independent of it. We have one e-commerce company we're working with right now who's in kind of like perfume and beauty products. And this is the main pain point. This person cannot get themselves out of the inbox, out of the email. And even though there is a pattern to what kinds of requests they receive and how to handle them, they never give themselves permission to take 10 minutes to just write down what that pattern is. And so they never escape it. And it hurts to see.
In your life specifically, like I mentioned, this whole process, you're going through, your entire business is about streamlining and operating efficiently and creating more time. As you have done that, we entrepreneurs are really great at working for work's sake. At least I am. I'll speak for myself here, right? Like you're like, and so if we free up something, the chances we're like, I'm going to go out and just make myself a healthy salad with this free time or invest in this relationship. Like some of us do that. Many more of us, the temptation is to be like, I have more time to do the endless list of things which is going to be endless. You never get to the end of it. Sometimes that is, and it depends a lot on your goals, right? Like if you have a goal to build the largest organization you can, maybe this is the right choice. If your relationships are suffering and your health is suffering, like probably not the best use of that incremental time. How hard has it been for you to take that time that you freed up and use it for things that are most valuable? Like if you had to, because otherwise we're just automating ourselves into, it's just a prison that we build. So anyway, has that been attention at all as you've gotten much more efficient running the business?
I mean, you hit the nail on the head as to why I hate productivity content. I mean, I think there's the skew of productivity is all right. I was able to automate my inbox. So now it's time to, create 40 more videos a week. And I've fallen down that rabbit hole many a time, but I think I've come into this business and the process driven kind of mission is around reclaiming time that we don't want to spend and reallocating it to where we want to spend it. And so productivity to me is just doing what you want to be doing in that moment as fully as possible without thinking about work while you're playing your video game or worrying about your kids while you're at work. I think being present in where you are at is kind of the core value. So I think the temptation is there, but luckily for me, this whole business is one that I started for the pursuit of knowledge. I started this instead of going back to school because I wanted to learn. And for me, I think getting this extra time back allows me to reallocate in learning and refining what we do for clients and so on. And getting addicted to adding more stuff to that doesn't necessarily align with learning. Learning is going deep into certain things until you're able to pass them on. And I think that's a self-knowledge challenge that is pretty much all of what business ownership is. But it's one that fortunately, just thanks to life circumstances and the support of my partner, it's not one that I've had to struggle with too much because I just enjoy this so much and I'm able to balance those constraints. But I think everybody needs to find that line differently and give themselves permission to do so. Do
you have any advice or thoughts on hiring? I feel like hiring is something that I'm incredibly slow at. It takes a ton of bandwidth from other people. And to do well, you meaningfully, it should take, at a minimum, there should be a lot of intentionality and thought behind your hiring process. But any thoughts or advice you would give to people on how to systematize the hiring process without taking away the important checks that you should be putting in to make sure you're vetting your candidates?
Steal from people who are better at it. I mean, that goes for everything, right? I think everything takes forever when we rely on ourselves because we're entrepreneurs and we like to create. So we just want to create the most unique hiring process. But the fact of the matter is you could spend 1 hour, watch 10 videos on YouTube about 10 different hiring processes, put them on a whiteboard saying the ones that seem like they make sense to you. And there you go. You've got a hiring process. Most of the time wasted in things like hiring and other things are just not knowing what to do next, not knowing what the next step is, dragging out applicant pools. For everything, if we just record what we want to have happen, all of that overwhelm of what do I do next is resolved. And that can usually increase the speed and efficiency of a process by a significant margin just by reflecting on what do we want to do and writing it down. Other than that, I do think it takes practice. I'm certainly no hiring expert, but working with recruiters and hiring managers is a really nice way to jumpstart this for folks who are like, I've got no time to watch 10 videos on hiring. That's a nice way to outsource the process because you're paying a premium because they're giving you their process and you can learn from it.
Talk a little, if you would, so process-driven, your business. What can you help people with? You've got, obviously, processes are just your jam. It's what you love talking about. It's cool. I mean, I can see it in your face. It's cool to see the passion you have for this. What do you offer? And you have some great courses. Our team is going through some right now that have been phenomenal. How can you help people? Talk about the things you do, either in terms of services or trainings that can help people get better at this.
Yeah. So at the core of it, what Process Driven does is we make it pretty much impossible for daily work to feel stressful. The way we do that is by helping you build processes you can rely on and the tools you already use. So those two pieces are kind of the programs we have. We help people learn software. So right now we work with ClickUp and SmartSuite. We're probably going to add more in the future. And to build processes you can rely on, we have a program called Foundations that does just that. It teaches you how to build a foundation of process for your business and make it part of your culture so you can feel that you're relying on those best practices and playbooks rather than your memory, your stress, your own inertia as the thing that's moving the whole business forward. So courses, membership, and we also have training events like this. Next week, actually, I'm doing a live workshop where we're going to be writing SOPs with hundreds of entrepreneurs in real time, just holding their feet to the fire saying, all right, write this next. And by the end, we're going to be doing a giant SOP swap. So Lots of
Very
different
cool.
things.
Do you ever do, or your team, do one-on-one consulting? Come into a business, look at stuff, provide guidance. Here's your task list. Come back a week later, an iterative process, but more in like a personalized manner.
Right now, that's what we're doing inside our process-driven foundations program. So we have a coaching staff, and we work one-on-one with folks throughout that journey. I used to do that just freestyle out and above, but I would find myself repeating a lot of basic principles where I'm like, you know what, if we all get on the same page, then the time will be more efficient for everybody. So we've now modeled that into our process-driven foundations program.
I mean, it seems like if you didn't have a team that was working off a process for that, that might be a red flag. So pretty good that you do. It seems to speak to the legitimacy of the program there. Fantastic. Well, if that's interesting to you, make sure to check it out. The website is processdriven.co, I believe. So head on over there, and also a great YouTube channel, Process Driven YouTube channel. We'll link up to both of those in the show notes. Layla, would love to do a quick lightning round here before we cap this off if you're game. So I'll just fire some questions at you, and feel free to, one or two words or one or two sentences for answers. First one, what's one of the fondest memories you have from your childhood?
When we used to go on road trips to Florida from Pennsylvania, I had no internet, but I loved playing with computers. So I would deconstruct clip art images in the old Microsoft PowerPoint and animate them and build movies for myself and my siblings.
Awesome. That's one of my favorite answers to that question. As someone who grew up with a very basic computer and did a lot of basic programming in my youth, I can kind of relate to that. You live in Salt Lake now, I believe. If you weren't living in Salt Lake, where would you live and why?
I mean, I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. I just moved here a year ago, so I feel like I cashed in my chips already, and I think I would want to be exactly where I'm at because we moved across the country just for this culture and environment. So
here. All right. Refuse the question on the grounds that it's too
it's too new. I'm not packing up again.
Location. What's the most unusual thing that you have seen SOP'd or had a process built into? Like, I don't know. I think about maybe someone who has a cattle farm where they SOP'd their birthing at the calving season. Something that you're just like, wow, I can't believe that we did this, but it's actually working, and this is very unusual. Anything come to mind?
We had a client who SOP'd cleaning her family bar on the island that they worked on, of where exactly everything goes in the bar at the end of the day for the family and the local people in the island who would come to it. So that way anyone in the family could run the family bar.
Awesome.
That was pretty original.
Do you ever see parents do this? I have done this with a limited degree of success, and the discipline has kind of failed on my side, but like, end of day, you walk in, like, I have 3 kids, house is just disaster. There's like crap everywhere, right? And so now we've got like, okay, like here's the laminated checklist for the stuff you have to do before we'll feed you dinner, et cetera, et cetera. And because you think about that, and like when you're doing the same thing over and over, it's my fault as the parent, as like, the kids later to set the example and to give them the framework for doing that kind of stuff. So really it's all on me. But do you see parents ever doing this to bring some of the chaos out of their house with a lot of young kids? I know it's a really random question.
I don't have too much exposure. I'm child free right now, but I have seen allusions to it. Most of our team members have kiddos and they've got some kind of system like this. I think that would be a very interesting arena, like in a future life, to explore. Because what does that look like? It would be so different, but at the same time, the cynic in me is like, is it that different than dealing with adults? Maybe not.
Probably not that much different when you boil it down. I've actually thought this would be an amazing product. Like if you could sell this box that had it, and your cost of goods sold, it would all be in the IP and the processes. And what you're selling parents is like peace of mind, a house that doesn't have like, mud smeared down the middle of the cat. Like I think the fundamentals are there. Yes. So if someone wants to run with it, feel free.
Oh, the marketing campaign would be great. Just alone, you'd have so much content there.
Yeah. I mean, the marketing, the potential for the creative that you could put out there that would resonate, that parents would just be like, yes, I feel seen here, would be off the charts. Favorite, what's the hardest part of your business?
Choosing what to fail at.
Choosing what to fail at. What's
like you want to make mistakes, but you want to make big mistakes, but also not irreversible mistakes. So finding out what failing looks like in your own business, I think, has been the hardest part.
Yeah. Who's someone that you follow, a thought leader, someone else that does processes really well, that you think is worth other people either following on Twitter, reading? Like, who's someone else that's really interesting and smart in this space?
Right now, I've been watching a lot of content from Jay Klaus, who does creator science, and not a process person. I don't think he described himself that way. But what I love is how he's taking a creative form of, in this case, content creation, which is something I'm diving more into, and turning it into a process without maybe acknowledging it. Really great example of like macaroni and the broccoli. He's spewing out process information every day, but you would never know it unless you listen closely. And I think that's really, really clever.
Jay, how do you spell his last name?
Clouse.
Okay.
I want to say Creator Science is the company. That one's easier to spell.
Awesome. Jay Klaus. We'll have to check him out. This is the most potentially uncomfortable question in the round. How much money is enough? So you can either answer this as a lump sum, like, hey, if I had $10 million on the back of my motorcycle and I headed off into the hills, like, that'd be good. I'd be set. Like, if I had any more, great. But if not, I'm okay. Or you can answer it as a fixed amount in income per year for the rest of your life. I get $200K per life. I get $1 million per year per life. And so pick your poison there, but how much is enough?
I'm not really motivated by money. So I would say such a small amount. To me, I think $20,000 a year would be plenty, because honestly, if I got any more than that, it would be meaningless. To me, money is a measure of how well or not well this game of business I love to do is doing. So receiving a lump sum of it would actually take away from the joy of pursuing it. It's like, oh, do you want to, here's your first place trophy. I don't want the trophy. You can keep it. I'd rather keep playing the game.
Got it. Yeah. Kind of if you have kids or if someone had kids and you give them a huge trust fund, you kind of mess up their life kind of idea. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And living on the back of a motorcycle in BLM land out here, you can do that for, $1,000 a year. You're fine.
Very true. Actually, that's a great point. How many hours a week do you work?
I think it changes each season. Last season, I would say, was very light, like 30 hours a week, but I wouldn't take many vacations. This season, I'm much more into it. I'm just kind of really enjoying it. So I'm probably closer to 10 hours a day, but I take 4+ weeks of vacation a year.
And what do you spend most of your time doing, giving, obviously you strike me as someone who's a lot of the repeatable things you get off your plate. So what do you spend most of your day doing and focused on?
Changing processes, which comes down to whether it's a sales funnel, whether it's how we answer podcasting requests. I think what I spend a lot of time is consuming expert knowledge and picking out that one gold nugget that's so good. I want to steal that, and then relaying that to the team or fixing it myself if I want to get into the weeds. That's where most of my day is probably spent, and I absolutely love it.
That's cool. And then last question, number one hobby, and you can't say work, you can't say moto capping because we know about that. So apart from those two and SOPs, what's something you love to do?
How bad would it be if SOP was my hobby?
It would be.
just end a call there. Like, no, she's done. No, I would probably say rock climbing. Beyond that, indoor bouldering is my jam. It's kind of my first thing that brought me out here before moto camping, and that would be what I'd lock in on.
You are in a good spot. You can't live anywhere else.
I'm stuck.
Layla, this has been phenomenal. Thank you. Again, if you're listening, processdriven.co, make sure to head over there. If you want to upgrade how you think about processes, if you want to really start using ClickUp more efficiently than you are now, or if you just want to get in touch about having some work with their team on optimizing this kind of stuff. So deeply appreciate it. Thank you for all the advice. Thank you for all the knowledge. Thank you for letting me rip off your contact us form. Totally going to do that because it's brilliant. And hope we get to stay in touch. So thanks so much for being on here.
Thanks for having me. This is great.